Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to tonight's special edition of Intelligent Insight on UNN TV. I'm your host, Paul Chimbugwe, and we have a thought-provoking show in store for you. Tonight, we shine a spotlight on the trending video clips featuring African leaders who are boldly, if they are, speaking out against the perceived disrespect and manipulation by Western counterparts. Joining us in the studios are two distinguished guests who will help us analyze these speeches and delve deeper into the implications from or for African politics and relations with the West. Please give a warm welcome to Dr. Kazadi wa Mukana, renowned ethnomusicologist and professor of ethnomusicology at Kent State University, and Mr. Remigius Kintu, esteemed commentator, political commentator, and expert in African affairs. Let's dive into these captivating speeches and gain valuable insight into the evolving dynamics between African leaders and their Western counterpart. But before that, I want our new guest to greet you, to greet our viewers, and I want to welcome you, Dr. Kazadi wa Mukana, on UNN, the Truth Command Center. Say hello to our viewers.
Thank you very much, Paul. Thank you very much. And say also hello to all the viewers who are there who also continue to watch your program. Thank you very much.
Senior Remigius, please, you are welcome.
Thank you, Paul. It is so nice to be here together with my good old friend, Dr. Kazadi, because we have grown up together, although we don't have the same gray hair. But it is nice to be here and talk about this important issue of African leaders being manipulated and together with our countries being exploited by the same people who colonized us and want to continue exploiting us. It is important that you pay attention to the presentations which are going to be laid out today for your free consumption. Welcome to our program.
Okay, thank you very much, Senior Remigius. Now, who is Dr. Kazadi wa Mukana? Ladies and gentlemen, we are honored to have with us tonight in the studios Dr. Kazadi wa Mukana, a distinguished ethnomusicologist and professor of ethnomusicology at Kent State University in Ohio, USA. With an impressive background in African music and a deep understanding of cultural dynamics, Dr. Mukana brings a wealth of expertise to our discussion on African politics and Western relations. As the director of African Assemble and a prolific author, Dr. Mukana has dedicated his career to exploring the rich musical heritage of the Democratic Republic of the Congo and shedding light on the global influence of African music. His notable works, such as characteristic criteria in the vocal music of the Luba Shankandi children and interdisciplinary study of the ox and the slave, Bumba Meu Boi. Hysterical music drama in Brazil demonstrate his commitment to interdisciplinary research and the exploration of cultural connections. Through his thought-provoking articles, including Toward the Quest for the Truth in Ethnomusicology and Globalization of the Urban Music of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Dr. Mukana has challenged conventional perspectives and contributed significantly to the field of ethnomusicology. His expertise extends to the study of Africanisms in the music of Latin America, particularly Brazil, emphasizing the resilient cultural identity of African descendants in the diaspora. Currently engaged in research projects focusing on urban music and musicians in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Dr. Mukana remains at the forefront of scholarly endeavors. His dedication to understanding the evolution of African music in contemporary contexts reflects his commitment to promoting cultural dialogue and bridging cultural gaps. Joining us tonight as we delve into an insightful conversation with Dr. Kazadi wa Mukana, where we'll explore African politics, Western relations, and the potential pathways towards a harmonious partnership. Prepare to be enlightened and inspired by the profound knowledge and unique perspective of our esteemed guest. Before going into questions, let us have a look on our first video. Ladies and gentlemen.
Now, on one occasion, I didn't go that time. These excellencies, this one here, Jacob Zuma, and the others, I was not there, but my minister was among them. They entered a plane in Nouakchott in his place. They were going to Libya to mediate. And they were told by NATO to go back. Yes. Said, you go back. Yes, he's here. If I'm telling lies, I'm not the one who invited him, you're the one who invited him. African presidents on an African mission over African soil were ordered by NATO to go back. That NATO has not allowed them to land in Libya. Now, we call this in Swahili dharau, contempt. This is contempt. So now you can weigh yourselves now. Your presidents were ordered by NATO. 6 of them, not one. If it was only 7, maybe you could say. Six excellencies, African excellencies, were ordered, go back. Over Africa. Now, these fellows didn't listen to us. They continued They killed Gaddafi. Now Libya is in tatters. Up to today. And the problem did not only end in Libya, it went into Mali, it has gone now into Chad. The whole area is in flames. Egypt, yes. So now you see where you are. You were weak. Because of your weakness, you are colonized. Fortunately, we survived. And by a combination of factors, we got our freedom again. But we did not use our freedom to make ourselves stronger. We remained where we were. And now, the former colonialists are coming back to continue where they had left off.
Wow. Dr. Kazadi wa Mukuna, in President Yoweri Museveni's speech, he highlights the contempt shown towards African leaders when NATO ordered them to go back during their mission in Libya. What do you make of this display of disrespect and its broader implications, Doctor?
Well, excuse me. To be really blunt, with all the respect I have for President Museveni, to me it sounds like they call that in French, pour le public consumption. That speaks. Is there really truth in what he's saying? Or was just what making theatrical presentation for the people who were present to clap hands for him? Because the sincerity would be to do something positive, not just talk about it the way he's talking about it. So what did he do besides that? Besides saying that the 6 leaders were told to go back. Humiliation. They were humiliated. That's what he's telling us. What is he doing today as a leader in Africa? What is he doing? Nothing positive that will show that there's a truth in what he's saying. It's playing this. Excuse me for saying this. For me, public consumption, because I don't believe in what he's saying. Because he is humiliating himself while he knows what he's doing really is not really what he's talking about. He's saying one thing, but doing something else. I think he was talking about in Swahili, saying what is, but what about in his own language? There's what they call ubwenge. That's ubwenge. You say one thing, actually what you mean
Doctor, wait a minute. Do you know history about ubwenge?
Well, clarify if you, but I know that ubwenge is saying one thing, doing something else, and that is what all those nilotics apply. That's the biggest game they play all around the world, utilizing ubwenge, because ubwenge is what you want people to hear. You say it's always a sweet thing, and the French say that le corbeau et le renard. That's the same principle. The corbeau is holding nice cheese, but the renard wants that cheese. So speaks good things to a corbeau for him to sing. The moment you sing, the cheese falls. Le corbeau et le renard. Ubwenge. That's what he's doing. For me, that's what he's doing.
Really unbelievable to hear the Ubwenge, because for us, we have just covered that word and its meaning just few years back, like 1 year or 2 years. Ugandans know nothing about Ubwenge. It's only this channel which tried our best to preach and explain that word to the core. Mr. Remigius Kintu, what's your take on Mr. Museveni's words about NATO, the way they treated them?
Well, I agree with Dr. Kazadi when he has used that very classic phrase, uwenje. To me, what I pick from Museveni's speech is the highest degree of hypocrisy. Because Museveni wanted to look like he is an African standing up for Africa, yet he has spent, or rather he's spending, not 24 hours in a day, but 28 hours in a day advocating the opposite. It's not what you say that makes you who you are. It's what you do that depicts exactly who you are and what you believe in. Okay? We already know that Museveni did not raise a finger when Gaddafi was being slaughtered. Yet, Museveni should have been the first person of all African leaders to stand up and risk his own life in the defense of Gaddafi. For one good reason. Gaddafi is the one who supported Museveni 100%, financially, militarily, training his NRA soldiers, and I know a whole bunch of them who were trained in Libya. I know very well all the arms that were supplied by Gaddafi, which Museveni used in the struggle to gain power. Using the word a benefactor is demeaning to the role of Gaddafi in the presence of Museveni's rise to power. It's more than a benefactor. For him to say that in front of these people, I don't know how many people were there, but the picture looks like was a created picture because I see some Arabic faces in the background, but I don't see any African faces in that picture. Where was he when he was speaking? Who were the audience? How much did that speech saturate? All these are questions which we cannot answer. So I believe, plainly speaking, that was quite a bunch of BS.
It's really interesting. Dr. Kazadi, do you have a word to add on that before we go to another video clip?
No, I think my brother said everything very clearly, and they raised very serious questions. Is this something put together in the studio? Because there are no elements showing us, telling us exactly where was he when he was saying these things. Who was the audience that they had to receive all these things he was saying? Was he doing it for the interest of Europeans or for the interest of very small group of people who wanted to hear him and applause. So that's very important question that we have to raise in order to analyze deeply the value of what he said, because we don't know the audience. So I cannot add more than what my brother said, because it's very clearly stated, and it raised very serious questions there that I was personally didn't pay attention to them, but he raised it. Thanks very much. So there's nothing to add to it. For me, that's why I say the word ubwenge is a big umbrella that covers all this. He went for public consumption. Let me say this. You even heard he will repeat and six because he was waiting for the applause. So he was something he was saying for public consumption. If there was any public there, or maybe it was a studio put together in the studio. We don't know. Thank you very much, Chad.
Okay, thank you very much, Doctor. Now, we are going to watch our next video clip. This one from none other than the trending young president or young kid on block, William Ruto, the Kenyan president. Let's hear this.
We have also decided that it will not going to be business as usual. We have these meetings, Africa, US meeting, Africa, Europe, Africa, Turkey, Africa,
India.
Now we are waiting for, there is another one, Africa, Russia.
And Africa, Japan.
And Africa, Japan. We have made the decision that it is not intelligent for 54 of us to go and sit before one gentleman from another place. And sometimes we are mistreated.
Yeah.
You know, we are loaded into buses like school kids. You know, and it's not right.
Well, you are summoned. You know,
it's not right. So the decision that we have made as AU is that going forward, if there is going to be a discussion between Africa and any other country, we are going to be represented by the chair, the outgoing chair, the bureau.
Chair of the commission or the chair
and the chair of the Rex, and we have 5 Rex. That should be sufficient for, I mean, a meeting of maybe 6, 7. Yeah. That should be able to represent Africa. And that is the position I am taking as the president of Kenya. For any other meeting that we are going to have with all these requests that we have a meeting between Africa and one other country, we respect the sovereignty of others. I think to ask for reciprocation is not to ask for too much.
No.
And for us to agree that let us have this kind of setup. The only, because I had a conversation with President Kagame, and he actually led that particular position. I have had a conversation with Prime Minister Abiy. He believes very strongly that that should be the position of our continent. Because, as you have said, if we don't respect ourselves, nobody is going to respect us. And we should be able to take that kind of decision. Yeah. And part of that respecting ourselves is when we say African problems, African solutions. We must be serious about the solutions. It cannot be rhetoric. It cannot be talk. It must be accompanied by what realistically and practically we are doing. To me, what kind of outcome you expect where 50 heads of state are sitting? Everybody is asked for speak to 1.5 minutes. You speak to for 1.5 minutes. What kind of engagement are you going to get? You're going to get nothing, right? The best that you get is photographs. Yeah. That's it. Precisely. You get these photographs, they normally line us up somewhere, crowd of 50 heads of state, and that's all we come home with, because there isn't time to engage any serious country that wants to engage with Africa, must respect first our architecture. If we have said we are going to be represented by the Troika, why are you inviting 50 people unless you want to sabotage the whole discussion? And if you can't respect our own rules, it is a sign of lack of goodwill. I mean, you must, so that when we engage, if we have a smaller group of 5 people, then you can have a meaningful conversation. And we can have a meeting of equals. But here you are, you represent 200-300 million people. You have a guy here who represents 10 people. You have another guy.
Senior Kintu, to start with you, President William Ruto of Kenya raises concerns about the unequal power dynamics in Africa's engagement with other countries. He emphasizes the need for Africa to be represented by a smaller, more meaningful group. How significant is this call for equal participation in discussions between Africa and the West? Senior.
In the first place, President Ruto has said something that we have to respect ourselves. I agree with him 100%. But it should be, as he says, not merely a rhetoric statement, but something we put in action in everything we do, every single day, every single minute of our lives. My question to President Ruto, are you respecting yourself? Are you practicing exactly what you are preaching? Now, we can go into a discussion for 10 years and not exhaust that question. However, I will move on. President Ruto, by insisting on respecting ourselves and also mentioning that if we are being invited to discuss any issues about Africa, I presume he is talking about discussing some issues which concern Africa, or rather discussing or looking for solutions to Africa's serious problems. The question is, if Africa has any problems, where are those problems coming from? Well, I grew up in a village, and my father, we used to have some chickens around the house, running around the banana plantation eating insects. But many times, some of these little wild coyotes used to come and raid our chickens and eat them. And we, as young boys, we could get stones and sticks and chase those little animals, or the kites in the sky. Now, if I know that those coyotes and the kites are stealing our chickens, how can you picture me going there to negotiate with them on their own turf about the predicament we are experiencing in my father's home because those little coyotes and the kites are eating our chickens. You don't do that. I have no time to negotiate with the coyotes which are eating our chickens. Now, the only thing I would do is to build a barricade so that they do not have access to my chickens. You cannot negotiate with the raiders over your own property. Now, when you listen to President Ruto's speech, he also says we should have our own agenda. Have you set up your own agenda as Africans and be able to stand up and defend it? But the same president is saying, or rather what he's doing, because when he became president, the white people, or rather the capitalists, who are raiding and eating everything there is in the DRC, need their predatory agenda to be protected and defended. They bring in Kenya, they bring in Uganda, after having sent in Rwanda, to protect their root of Congo. The same man who is telling you we have to be ourselves is the same man following the agenda of these external bastards, if I could use that word, to carry on what they are doing in the DRC. Now, where is your sovereignty? You should have gone in Congo to defend the Congolese. Now, when the Congolese have stood up and they said, we don't want Kenya, we don't want Uganda, we don't want Rwanda on our Congolese soil, they are right. Because you are puppets of the exploiters of this territory. So I do not see an honest, independent stand in Ruto's statement when I look at the entire constellation of the things he is carrying out in the region. And if you cannot take care of your own home territory, your region, then your integrity, your honesty is obviously doubted by those of us who are watching.
Thank you very much, Senior. Doctor, what is your take on President Ruto's statement?
Frankly speaking, my brother said it all. As I was listening to him, I was just shaking my head. Yes. How can you go and negotiate with those, excuse the term, but this is a term we use among ourselves, Bikwangala, that are continue to do something wrong? I don't even know how to. I told myself I'm going to have to keep cool, because I can go on different tangents and start screaming. I don't want to do that. But the point here is what my brother said. It's not what you say, but it's what you do that determines who you are. When the president said that we have to identify ourselves, we have to do this, and yet he's still working for those people that he thinks they're minimizing the value of African leaders. Proof. Since my brother brought this thing about the DRC, AIC, the East African Community, we're supposed to. That's why I asked you, who created those organizations? Were they created really for Africans, or were created by the Westerners to serve their purpose? For example, DRC is being aggressed by Rwanda, a neighbor. AIC is created and created the regional forces to help push the invaders out of DRC. The missions are being clearly determined in Luanda and in Nairobi, and the missions are clearly defined. Which country is going to do what, but it's going to be a mission of offensive in order to push the aggressors out. Kenya is given the mission of controlling, coordinating the whole mission. But they will come through a certain corridor. No, Kenya comes in by plane in the zone where they're not supposed to be there. And it contradicts the the chief of the army, Congolese, who just happened to say, we are happy to have the regional forces to help us do this mission. The Kenyan general takes the microphone at the same time. Immediately, he said, no, we didn't come here to fight. We came to protect the airport. That was not the mission. So what he's saying, again, takes us back to the first word we used with President Museveni, ubwenge, for public consumption. I don't believe him, and I will have a hard time to believe anything coming out of this man's mouth. That's all I can add to this one. I don't believe him. I don't believe in anything this man would say in this body, because he's shaking hand with Kagame. There's nothing wrong. He's another president from Africa. We agree. But what is Kagame representing? Is it really African value? I don't believe so. So those are type of things we have to keep in mind. And as my brother ended, whatever you're doing, it raises a doubt, what so that listening to you. And I agree with him. So he's I don't know what to say more than that before I lose it, as expression goes, because I don't agree with him. Don't agree with him. He's a person who doesn't even know what he's saying, or he knows what he's saying, but he's trying to put the smoke in front of our eyes, things that we don't see. That's why we're wearing glasses, so we can see better.
Thank you very much, Dr. Senior. Do you have something to add before we continue?
President Ruto, I think, was he before he became a president or after he became president? He said that the Congolese people don't even have cows. We're going to make money by selling milk to the, and the way he put it in Swahili, we are going to mint money in the Congo. Because that's all he's looking at, minting money, because the Congolese people, as he's put it, are stupid. All they know is drinking, dancing, and singing. So while they are doing that, we're going to be minting money. And I recall speaking to a Kenyan who said, we are going to build roads. Then I said, I've been to Congo. I know they don't have a very good infrastructure of roads. You cannot drive from Kinshasa to uh, Lubumbashi, or to, not to Lubumbashi, to what is this place, Mbujimai or some other place. There are no good roads in Congo connecting in the country. The man told me, no, we are going to build roads which can help us trade with those parts of Congo where we are going to have our interest. In other words, he's not going to behave any differently from the white man who has been exploiting the Congo. Okay? So we are going to be an extension of the exploitation scheme which has already been laid out by the white man. But they don't care about the Congo people.
Nope.
And you know what is so interesting, or rather sad to say? Congo has lost, according to some reports I've seen, at least 12 million people have been killed in the Congo. And nobody, not a single person, has stood out to cry for the loss of so many innocent human lives. And yet, these puppets, these African leaders, and I think I'm right to call them puppets, who have been manipulated by the colonialists, they are crying out less than 500,000 people killed in Ukraine. And they think that is horrible. But it's not horrible if 12 million people are killed in Congo. It is not horrible if 1 million people, Tigris, have been killed in Ethiopia. It is not horrible if 500,000 people have been killed in Cameroon, between the Francophone and the English parts of the country. It is not horrible if a couple of thousands of people are murdered by Museveni in Karamoja and the Kasese area or Acholi area of Uganda. All those don't matter. It reminds me of what my good friend Ramsey Clark, who was Attorney General here in the United States, said. He said, you Africans have to wake up and understand that in the eyes of Mzungu, your lives are dispensable. He said that to me when we are coming from a dinner party in Laredo, Texas. So I'm not talking about bullshitting that I've read in books or papers. No, physical conversation, because we're friends and we're together in Laredo, Texas. You Africans have to understand that your lives are dispensable. In other words, nobody gives a damn with how 12 million people have been killed, 1 million people. Well, those are Africans. Let them die. And they make these African leaders who are now puppets to cry out murder when white people, 1,000, 2,000, 10,000, are killed in Ukraine. Certainly, I respect those are also human lives. But the Ukrainians are as human lives as the Congolese or the Somalis or the Ethiopians or the Cameroonians or the Ugandans or the Rwandese. Let's be clear right from the start. Now, one other thing I can say, it is you watching me and you who are listening to us as Africans. It is our duty. If these, as my friend called them, these Bikwangara leaders are going to behave like that, it is our duty to put them straight or to put them away. Either we put them straight or we put them away. But we cannot go on like this, acquiescing with this nonsense of manipulated puppet leaders in Africa. That is not going to cut the cake. And I stick to my word.
Otherwise, let me
Go ahead,
piggyback on
Doctor.
that. Yeah, let me piggyback on that because what he said is very important. We have to wake up. Wake up in the sense that we're going to have to determine who are we. We cannot continue on always waiting till they tell us something. You want to make a decision, oh, what the West going to say? You want to, no. We don't care what they're going to say because we are our own people. We are our own nation. We must determine that we're going to do it for us, not because of this, they say. And that's our biggest problem with our leaders. They always, oh, they're going to call me. We're going to, and we take so much from the West without knowing the value of what they have done, because that's their own thing. Today we think we're singing democracy, democratic republic of hey. Why are we democratic? We don't know. Because even where the word democracy coming from, they also don't know. But we take it so heavily, we think that is it. We lose what is our own. We have to keep our own first. Then, as my brother said, we keep our own, but we pick selectively. But we must mix it with our own to create our own identity. Until we do that, all the Ruto is saying, or anybody saying, is for public consumption. And that's what they told them by their controller to tell us so they can continue to control us. So we have to wake up as a people, put them out or whatever out so that they stop doing what they're doing. And that is, as we were talking before the show started, there's, I think, a professor or somebody was speaking in U.S. about Africa and Europe, what he said, Europe must not let Africa develop because they know. If you read the book by Cheikh Anta Diop, The African Origin of Civilization, we, Africa, used to be way up there. The civilization started there. But what happened? We began to, little by little, the leaders being taken and the mindset completely mixed up by the Western people, way of thinking, and today we're, in fact, if you also follow the series, The African by Professor Ali Masroui, he also follows the same thing to show clearly where Africa has gone wrong. And in fact, in his one of his episode, he concludes that Africa, you are not a country, you are a concept. Concept. That means we are the concept of what the world should be. So it's very important that we have to wake up as people in Africa, and our leaders, if they make a mistake, to bring them back by telling them the reality. If they do not, well then we are not going to be our leaders no more. Period.
Wow. Thank you very much, Dr. Kazadi and Senior Remigius Kintu, for such wonderful insight. But before we continue our discussion, we will take a short break Stay tuned as we delve deeper into these compelling speeches, because we still have some here for you. So don't go away. We shall be back in a minute.
Dear fellow Ugandans, this is a question that has been asked over and over again. What is Uganda's problem? What is a unitary government? A unitary government is a type of government in which all power is centralized in the hands of a single ruler. In the unitary system of government, a single central government possesses total control over all political subdivisions. It means that there is no separation of powers between the different branches of government, and that the ruler has complete control over everything. In a unitary government, the people have little say in running their country. The political subdivisions have no option but to carry out directives of the central government, unlike the federal government, where responsibilities and powers are shared among entities. Now, these are the characters of a unitary government. 1. Does not have a system of checks and balances. It depicts that the political power is not spread across various branches of government. In a unitary system, all strength lies within the central government, allowing one person or group to completely control everything in their country. 2. Centralized. All power rests with the ruler or ruling party and does not belong to any other branch of government, whether legislative or judicial. This type of government has little or no system for sharing and distributing power. It will be difficult for people to voice concerns or grievances regarding how their country is run in a unitary system. 3. Powerful ruling party. The ruler holds much more political power than the legislatures because they can make and change laws without the approval of any other branch. They also have appointments in various government branches such as the cabinet and the judiciary. 4. One-party system. There is only one ruling party in a unitary system, and thus there is little or no need for opposition parties and politicians. This allows for much easier control of power and decision-making by the leader. However, sometimes in a unitary system, another party may be authorized to exist, but still does not pose an equal or significant threat to the ruling party's existence. 5. Most powerful person is the head of state. The head of state, this could be the ruler, king, queen, rules with absolute power. The leader may be either a monarch or an elected leader with public authority over the entire country. 6. Powerful central government. Power rests with the central government rather than state governments in a unitary system. The head of state holds much more governmental power to make or change laws without getting approval from any other branch of the government. They also have appointments in various government branches such as the cabinet and the judiciary. One-party systems are common in unitary governments because it makes it much easier for the ruling party to control and manage everything related to how their country runs. Every decision can be made by the head of state and their cabinet, leaving little or no room for any opposition. 7. Leaders have complete control over everything. All are submissive to the leader. There is no system of checks and balances. Thus, there is lack of separation between powers. It means that all power rests within the central government rather than individual branches of government, such as the legislatures and the judiciaries. The ruling party has complete control over decisions with little interference from anyone else. Unitary governments are similar to authoritarian governments because both eliminate many sources of balance to apply pressure on specific issues. As a result, progress can be easily achieved without multiple opinions or points of views. 8. Weak state governments. In a unitary system, state governments are fragile compared to the central government. The head of state has complete control over everything, which means that all power is centralized within the central government. It's one of the main reasons there is usually only one ruling party in unitary systems. It makes it much easier for the ruling party in charge to exert their influence and gain complete control over everything. It is notable that most stable and progressive countries have federal forms of government, while countries that are unstable and have low economic growth have unitary forms of government. These are countries that always have problems, plunged into civil wars, dictatorships, weak institutions, corruption, and long overstay in power. So dear fellow Ugandans, this is the time we advocate for a change of system by organizing a referendum to change the system of government so masses could choose between the unitary government versus the federal government. Thank you. Why do we need the federal system of governance in Uganda? And what is federalism? Federal is a system of governance. It's not about getting rid of the central government. It's not about party politics. It's not about multi-partisan or absence of it. It's not about religious differences. It's not about tribalism. It is not for the benefit of Buganda alone. It's not about monarchism. It's not about land or dispossessing people from land. It is not about supremacy of one region over another or others. It's about helping the central government to provide services more efficiently and provide more effective development to the people. It's about sharing power and responsibilities between the central government and regional governments. Federalism is about providing more prosperity, more wealth, more feeling of belonging and participation in governance by marginalized and non-marginalized people. The federal system of government minimizes possibilities of waging war against the central government. It minimizes internal acts of terrorism and discontent against the central government. It has inbuilt safeguards that ensure uniform growth for all regions of the country, and additional measures to make sure that the marginalized or less developed regions of the country can catch up through the system of equalization grants and affirmative action programs. This ensures that the regions with greater income and development contribute a percentage of their earnings to the developed areas which may be less developed. It should be noted that federalism, though different from decentralization, does not contradict or exclude decentralization. The two systems can and should coexist and complement each other at the regional level. Advocating federal does not mean or seek to get rid of decentralization from regional tier, nor does it mean getting rid of district MPs, LC leaders, or other regional government officials. To learn more about federalism, Register and join UFCC at www.ufcc.uk.
Welcome back to Intelligent Insights on UNN TV. We are engaged in a captivating discussion with Dr. Kazadi wa Mukana and the senior Remigius Kintu, examining powerful speeches by African leaders addressing the treatment and perceptions of Africa by the Western world. Let us continue our exploration and gain further understanding. The next video also comes from President Ruto of Kenya. Let's have a look at it.
We want another organization of equals, where you have as much say because you pay, as much as we do because we also pay. What we are saying is different. Is that what you're saying? You're saying is good, but it's not what you're saying. We are not saying that we continue to have what the taxes France is paying, the taxes Kenya is paying in the current setup. Those are national issues. We need a financial transaction tax at a global level where even countries like Kenya pay. We do not want anything for free. You will pay more eventually because you have a bigger economy. We will pay commensurate to our economy. And we want those resources controlled not by IMF and World Bank. Because IMF and World Bank, you have the final say. We don't have no say. We want another organization of equals, where you have as much say because you pay, as much as we do because we also pay. That's the organization we are looking for. And that is why we are saying we need a new financial architecture, where governance, where power is not on the hands of a few people. We can agree on the governance of the institution. We can agree on the sharing of power so that all of us have access to resources that go to making sure, number one, renewable energy. We invest in decarbonization. Number two, adaptation, mitigation, smart agriculture. Number three, restoring our planet, restoring our biodiversity, and making sure our carbon sinks work. This is what we are saying, and we would appreciate a little understanding. We want to be, we are talking the normal. If we continue talking the normal, Emmanuel, we will never solve this problem. Things are not going forward, they're going backwards. Tokenism, installment will not solve this problem. We have a much bigger problem than the installment we are discussing here will solve. You're not hearing us.
I will, if I may.
Yeah.
Okay. Senior Remigius Kintu, as economist, President William Ruto's second speech addresses the issue of financial architecture and calls for a more equitable global governance system. How can Africa work towards creating a new financial framework that ensures its voice is heard and its interests are represented on the international stage? Senior.
Well, you have brought me to a point whereby I would look at my wife in the kitchen trying to prepare some food. Now, everything I'm going to mention is edible. We would have rice, cassava, sweet potatoes, fish, pork, chicken, sugar, salt, and pepper. And she would put all of those in one pot. And the cook and said, honey, I'm preparing a wonderful dinner for Sunday afternoon. Is that edible? Can you eat it? President Ruto, I think he was ill-advised. He cannot talk about teaming up with these people, forming a new organization as equal partners. I mean, it's just like what I've just described. My wife would prepare in one big pot. You cannot do that. You cannot put us and them in one organization. What we need to do as Africans is to dismantle everything that was created by colonialists, which was done for their own purpose, not for ours. Now, any of you people listening to us, I would say go back and read, if you didn't read it before. Why was the World Bank instituted? It was called the Bank for International Reconstruction and Development. After World War II, it was established to reconstruct and redevelop a totally devastated Europe. Not Congo, not Uganda, not Kenya, not Sudan. Those were not even in the area of consideration. The IMF was instituted by these Europeans, by the way, only Western Europeans, not Eastern Europeans. One of my former professors, Dr. Spiegel, who was an Austrian, was one of the specialists in formulating first the League of Nations and later on the United Nations and IMF and the World Bank as an expert in economics. He told us we Africans were never in the picture. Today, as we are talking, over 65% of the profits of the World Bank are from their activities in Africa. Over 65%. You go check it out. What Africa needs is, as Dr. Kazadi said, we have to understand ourselves. This is one thing that is missing. You cannot have self-respect unless you know who you are. How do you know yourself? Because when you know yourself, then you can be able to appreciate who you are and what you have before you grab all the other crap from anywhere, east, west, right, left, and the center. Now, Dr. Kazadi mentioned the book of The Origin of African Civilization by Dr. Diapo. We Africans are the origin not only of human race, but also of civilization. Once you know what you have to put value in it. You are not going to put value in what you don't know. Dr. Kazadi is a friend of mine, as you know. One time he told me something. He's a musicologist, as you said, which is true. One time I asked him, you as an expert, why don't you put the music of Congo in writing so that future generations can play it the way now people are playing the music of Mozart, Beethoven, Tchaikovsky, because it is written. He laughed at me. He said, "No way. He's going to prove me if I'm wrong." He said, "You cannot put our music in writing because the concept of our African music cannot be put in these notes. You have to have it in you. Why do we have it and these other Johnny come lately in the race of civilization? Theirs can be put in writing because we are the original. We are the original people. Our thing is so deeply and highly developed by millions of years of civilization, which nobody else shares. Not on this planet, maybe another planet. So this is what I'm saying. Ruto should have understood. We have the original Africa. As Dr. Kazadi said, Africa is not a continent, it's a concept. Ours is so deep. You cannot mix it with this, taka, if I could use that, our African language. We cannot. And the reason why we are suffering is because we allowed ourselves to be and stay in the same bed with these parasites. We have to get out of that bed. You cannot stay in an infested bed of parasites which have nothing to offer but to milk you and suck your blood day in and day out. And you think you are going to have a good mutual relationship. No way. I go a step further. We have to devise our own institutions. And I would even support getting a hell out of the United Nations because it was never designed for us. And it is not serving our interests. We should get out of the World Bank. We should have our own African Continental Central Bank. We should have our own systems of trade, communication, transport, and even the arts. Why should we crave to participate in the Hollywood jamborees when these people's music, those of you who listen to cowboy music and this so-called country music, even their stupid country music does not come anywhere closer to what in Uganda we call kadongo kamu. It just can't, it is mixing apples and tomatoes. It just doesn't work. And that is going to come from understanding who in the hell we are. Then we appreciate ourselves, and then we project the goodness that comes from us. And to them you say, take it or leave it. We are still Africans. I remember that woman who was Prime Minister of England. What was her name? It has skipped my tongue. Heath, was it she? Heath? Anyway, people would remember. They asked her, why have, when they were trying to set up the European Union, and they said, why have you refused to sign? You know what she told them? Because we are British. That was the answer. I mean, people resented it. However, I want to be able to say, you know what? You are nice to see you here in Paris, President Macron, but we are Africans. And that would answer everything.
Doctor, before you add to the question, can you give us a little glimpse of what Senior Remigius had just said about the music of Africa. Please, please.
I'm, I'm, I'm tickled and happy to see that my brother remembers our conversation when I say, because he asked me to put something on paper that will be like a Mozart, Beethoven, and all the boys, so that can be played later on. No, it's very difficult because there's one friend of mine from Nigeria. He's also ethnomusicologist who says it's easier for an African musician to show you what he has done than for him to explain to you how to do what he has done. No, he shows, he plays for you, and you understand what he said. Or he cannot write it down for you to know what it. No, so it's very difficult. Our music comes from the soul. Even a good musician, Franco, I asked him why we play all the music from, we can play Beethoven on the guitar. He said, we can play any music they have out there on the guitar, but they cannot play our music because our music comes from inside, and it's very difficult to put on a piece of paper. You cannot put the feeling on a piece of paper. No. How can you put the Rambo Macchiato or put Poet Lutumba on a piece of paper to sound like a Dalian singing it or Madilu singing it? It's just impossible. So those are the type of things that only the soul can express. And that soul has to be African. And the European can, we have a Chinese coming to Congo, spend time in in Kinshasa, learning how to sing in Lingala. They sing in Lingala. They play the, but when they play, you close your eyes, you know, that's not African. Because it doesn't sound African. What the Brazilians say, you have to have the chant. The chant. The chant, you don't, you don't explain the chant. The chant is something inside. It's only you who have it inside who can express it. Nobody else can. So, in the music, that's why it is. African music comes from the inside. To put it on a piece of paper, you take the soul out of it, and the paper cannot contain the soul. So, in that sense, it's very impossible to put that on a piece of paper. So, to continue now with our discussion, I would say, very important thing my brother said, you have to know yourself first before you proceed. Now, I think that's exactly what Mobutu Sese Seko, may his soul rest in peace, was saying when he said, authenticity. Authenticity, I mean, let's go back to who are we? Know ourselves first before we can tackle anything else there. He not only that, no, but he said, let's go back to the ancestral way of being. Retour à l'authenticité. Because by going there, we will know where we come from. Who are we? Before we start adventuring out there. So, with that sense of knowing ourselves, it gives us the base of our existence. Who are we? Now, For example, that was just Mobutu talking about authenticity, which not only did he just talk about it, he imposed it after he went to visit Mao Zedong in China. He borrowed it. He borrowed something from Mao. He kept saying, no ties. There has to be something. So he created abacus. Abacus, which means down with the suits. Because he saw Mao. Look at Mao. Mao also did the same thing. He closed the door. Nobody out, nobody in. If we're going to die, we die on our own way. If we're going to survive, we're going to survive our own way. So they developed China. Today, China is one of the biggest power in the world because they're doing it their own way. That's what Africa needs also. To do it our own way, like the chairman, Frank Sinatra, say, I did it my way. Let's do it our own way, the African way. Let's do it the African way. Be it the economy, be it the food, be it whatever. Let's do it the African way. And the African way can only be done if we know ourselves and we respect who we are and not borrow blindly everything out there because they say, because what they're going to say, we don't care what they're going to say. We do not. President Ruto is talking sweet. Again, going back to President Ruto, he's a sweet talker, like any other politician. And Macron is sitting there. Macron is the one controlling all the Ruto thing. But he's talking on both sides of his mouth. I don't know if it was pleasing Macron or pleasing the rest of us, because he cannot fool me on that side. I know. Macron is controlling Ruto, Kagame, and all those boys out there. So, for him to talk about creating the economic institution, I agree with him. I think that's what Gaddafi had in mind, to create a bank that is purely African, to replace the World Bank. And I agree with Gaddafi. And I think that's one of the reasons it had to be eliminated, because of the ideas. Nkrumah had those great ideas to unite Africa. But all these guys that they had a good, again, I'm coming back to what the old man in South Africa said. If you see anything that you Africans do, the West is agitated, it's good for you. If they don't, and they don't, they embrace it quickly because it's good for them. So we have to be our leaders have to be very careful. And if they are not, as my brother said, we have to find a way to get them out or put them outside, because they're not serving our purpose, interests. We have to look for our interests, and we have to protect our interests at all costs, because that's what the West, all those Bazungu, that's what they do. They protect their interests first. As I say, in politics, there are no friends. There's no friendship. It's all interest. If you protect I see my interest being protected, I'll be with you. If it's not, hey, go your way, I go mine. So that's all I can add to that one at this moment.
Thank you so much, Doctor. And I wish President Ruto can go and purchase this book of Africa, My Beloved.
Mm-hmm.
It were written by none other than senior Remigius Kintu. But
Yes.
he compiled a liberation plan for a free and sovereign continent, Africa. So what President Ruto was addressing to, or were addressing to President Macron of France, he can find it and he can get all solutions in this book. Please, those who are watching us, look for this book. You will get to know that we have brains in Africa. And I agree with my guests here that we need to go our own way. So, we are inviting our esteemed viewers to join the conversation. If you have any question or questions or insights to share, feel free to call
Yes.
the studios right now and be a part of this important dialogue on African politics and Western leadership. But before going into call, we have our last video tonight.
Can I say something?
Have a look at it.
Listen, we cannot win the narrative battle by arguing in pockets. They are happy us talking about our localized, indigenized oppression. They are never happy us talking about the question of distribution and redistribution, of the global economy, of global power. And what Nkrumah and others realized in 1963 at the founding conference, if Africa is not represented, if Africa does not own its narrative, but you can't own your narrative if your leadership is totally disconnected from its people. You can't own your narrative if your intellectuals are totally disconnected. We have underinvested in rural areas and slums where the majority of our people are. In fact, we treat them as security threats and they are over-policed. Number two, we have underinvested in our academic and research institutions. We'd rather bring McKinsey and bring Deloitte and Touch. They will help us do AU reform. Why? Because there are no African consultancies that we know. Even if they exist, we have no relationship with them to help us with AU reforms, with anything else. And this is not a pronouncement on McKinsey or Deloitte. It's a pronouncement on ourselves. We have not, as a leadership, begun to recognize that the native is capable of knowledge. The native is capable of economy. The native is capable of invention. You can't change the narrative if the starting premise is we're trying to be like Europe and to catch up. We can't change the narrative when we're constantly trying to learn from others without understanding, and I'll end with that, what William Tunga said, the former Chief Justice of Kenya. He says, let's not engage in this romanticist view that there can only be one way to learn. We first must indigenize knowledge. That's what I said, learn from our culture and traditions. Number two, we must diversify who we learn from. We can not only learn from the West, we need to learn from everybody who has something to teach. Number three, we must domesticate what we learn. If we're going to learn anything, let's domesticate. I think the chairperson and the minister said it's consciousness. Narrative is first and foremost by realizing self-worth, self-belief, and looking inward so that when you look outward, it is to supplement not a vacuous state of nothingness and inferiority, but it is to supplement a very stable, solid foundation where your culture, where your values, where your value for people is important.
Very good.
Wow. What a video, what a speech to conclude our videos. clips tonight. This question goes to Dr. Kazadi Wamakuna. In the speech by the Zimbabwean gentleman, he emphasizes the need for Africa to own its narrative and highlights the disconnected between African leadership and the people. How crucial is it for African leaders to bridge this gap and empower their own citizens in shaping the continent's narrative? Doctor.
Well, I think we've already said it earlier, this thing about knowing ourselves. That's how we're going to develop our own narrative. We're going to have to define who are we first. And the people where they are, that's the root of who we are. Because if we can identify ourselves among all those people, that means the leaders will be, they will understand better who they are and what the mission they have for the people. For the people. So, for them to understand that, they have to look back to the grassroots and from there develop in order to improve the existence of what those people are. So we cannot be borrowing blindly what others have done because we don't know where they've threaded, where they have stepped in order for them to reach where they are today. So if, for example, that's the biggest, for me, that's the biggest, one of the biggest mistakes that we make in Africa. We see Europe today, but we don't know the history. Where they've been, we don't know. So we just say, oh, that's what they're doing in Europe. Okay, that's what they do today. But how old is that Europe? They started when? How many phases or where they have crossed in order for them to reach where they are? We are looking at them today, but what were they yesterday? So for us to develop our own identity, we can borrow anywhere, I don't care. But don't borrow blindly. You have to borrow wisely in order to you to identify, to know who you are first, and then take whatever you have borrowed and mix it with what you have in order to create your personal identity. That's what Africa needs. Our leaders, because the grassroots, we are just going blindly. We are going blindly because we are accepting, we trust in our leaders. And our leaders often, they don't look at the population, but they look at out there. What would they call me? They're going to call me dictators. They're going to call me that, hey. Sometimes that's what is needed for your population at that particular moment. Maybe what Africa needs today is not to be called democratic. A friend of mine said one time, Africa, we operate better with shikot, whip. Because if you use the whip, the African walks straight. If you put the whip down, the African say, "Oh, you are lying without teeth." So they start playing with you like a cat that doesn't have a. That's a lion. He doesn't have a teeth. I'm not afraid of him. But so when you whip, with the whip in your hand, African walk straight. So maybe that's what we need. Instead of talking about democracy now, Let's start first with that to get people. We will reach democracy later on, but first we have to be gradually releasing those type of things. Because right now, if you don't give them just everything, democracy, the French call libertinage, freedom, liberté, and libertinage. Liberté d'expression, freedom of speech is one thing, but libertinage means I don't even have to translate that in English. Libertinage, you have given them, you have thrown everything to the dogs, as it were, because now you can say anything. There's no more freedom of speech, but he has taken in the wrong direction. So I would say the gentleman is saying the right thing. Very much, I agree with him. We need to do our own, and that we're coming back to know ourselves and then create our own identity. I agree with him.
Very much, Doctor. Mr. Remigius, what is your take on that gentleman's speech?
Thank you very much. That gentleman gave a very, very provoking speech for all of us Africans. We have to get down, sit down, crack our heads, and look at everything as he says it. I wanted to say something about a man I met, and we spent about 3-4 hours talking. His name is Bishop Dumeni. At that time, he was a retired Lutheran bishop of Namibia. In a long conversation, he said, if you find an African leader whom the white man praises, if you can throw stones at him, please do it. But if you find an African leader whom the white man is calling all kinds of dirty names, if you have a rooster and a goat, donate it to him, because that's the good African. Now, this man, the video you played, is talking about African leaders being disconnected with their people. Evidently, yes, a good many of our African leaders are disconnected with their people because they didn't get into those positions through the wishful thinking of their people. They got into those positions put there by these exploiters who wanted to have a puppet they can manipulate to do their bid. So his eyes, 24 hours a day, are on, his eyes and ears are on what his people, the external forces, which put him in power, what do they want him to do? As my friend said earlier on, if they say jump, he says, how high do you want me to jump? But if you, the people in the villages of Africa, are screaming that you are suffering, you are overburdened, they don't even hear you because they are not connected with you. And actually, you do not matter. The man is in that position because these people told him to be in there so that he can do their bid. Those of you who remember the story of Congo Brazza, when the former president was overthrown because he wanted to raise the revenue, the percentage from the revenue of oil, so that he can have some extra money to develop his country. The French people said, that company called Alfie, they said, no, we are not going to raise. I think it was by then 13%. He wanted to raise it to, I think, 15 or 16%. They said no. And the next thing, They brought the French legionnaire, overthrew him, put his cousin there, who is now with the president, and the percentage of revenue from oil by that company, Alfie, was reduced from the 13% to 12%. And this idiot is still sitting there as a president when the country is sinking deeper into poverty. And to make it worse, another puppet of the white people has been brought in Congo Brazzaville from Kigali by the name of Paul Kagame to help him. Do you think they are going to do something that helps the Congolese? No, that helps the white man to exploit more. After all, after what they have done in Rwanda and the Congo, now they are trying to extend it into Brazzaville. These are the problems, as my brother was saying. We have to understand ourselves. Now, Dr. Kazadi brought up something. Do we know who these Europeans are? Do we know where they come from? In military science, in that book of that Chinese, which was written over 6,000 years ago, the first rule of military engagement is know your enemy. Do you know who the European is? If I look at him in terms of levels of civilization, he's a newcomer to the block. We have been in there for millions of years before the white man became. Actually, in that book, he says, we were civilized 100,000 years before the white people became civilized. And they know it. 100,000 years before they were, when we were being civilized, they were still barbarians.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
While we were civilized, even when the first Europeans to come to the continent, they found us with kingdoms and empires whereby everybody lived very well in affluence. Our chiefs were ornamented with gold and and silver and ivory, and our women were walking around in silk clothes. And one European quoted, he said, I didn't say poor person, I didn't say hungry person, I didn't say anybody stealing. And yet, that was not the case in Europe. You couldn't cross from Baltimore to Washington, D.C. before you ran into robbers on the road, among them the Mzungus. But that was not the case in Africa. So we have to know who these people we are dealing with. Why did they come to Africa? Why do they keep coming to Africa? Do you think they love looking at our beauty? Of course, we are wonderful. No. I would probably say they are the first people to invent the word obwenje. What they say is not what they do. I remember some years ago, I think it was about 15, 20 years ago, I went to Zimbabwe. At that time, they had issued a warning here in Washington, D.C., that no American should go to Zimbabwe because that country was dangerous. That was a ban issued by the State Department. And I flew from here, first to Johannesburg, then Johannesburg to Harare. When I got on the plane from Johannesburg to Harare, I asked the airline hostess, because I think I was the only black face on the damn plane. I asked the airline hostess, who looked like a mulatto, because it was South African Airways. I said, are all these people South Africans? He looked at me and looked in my face. He could read why I'm asking. Because all these were Bazungus. He said, let me go check the roster of the passengers. He said, about 80 to 90% of them are Americans. Then I said, but I left America. They told us Americans shouldn't go to Harare. What the hell are these people traveling there for? When I go to Harare and I met with President Mugabe, and he told me in his face how many Americans are here milking Harare's wealth. How many American companies and British companies are here feasting on Harare, Zimbabwe's wealth. And they are the same people who are telling us, don't go there. Now, do you believe that bull? You see, this is the problem. Know whom you are dealing with. Know who these Europeans are. Know why they are coming to Africa. It's not because they love you, or they, as they say, we are coming to help you. Baloney. They are not coming to help us. They are coming to help themselves. And the more we become ignorant and narrow-minded and short-sighted, the more they are going to suck our blood. Thank God we have so much of it. They have sucked it for more than 400 years, but we still have blood.
That's true. That's true. That's true. We got too much blood.
We got too much of it.
Indeed, you have too much. Anyway, let us have our viewers' views for now, but we shall not take many because it's a weekend. Those two gentlemen need to go out. They told me, they warned me when I was starting the show. Others, I will not talk about it, but what I know, they are going out after here. Okay, let us start with Raymond from Germany.
Thank you very much, UNN, for this very wonderful discussion you've put forward. I thank the participants, Dr. Kazadi wa Mukuna, Senior Remigius Kintu, and you, Prince Chimbukwe. I am going to comment on the viral video by President Ruto that he put forward as regards to African leaders being invited as a bunch to these superpowers. Now, I think he has a right. But the question we should be putting forward to President Ruto is that, does the African Union exist? Do the African people feel the power of the Western Union? Do the people really feel the representation of the Western Union? Because to what extent has the African Union helped in resolving individual country crises? When you look at just a few examples, like the elections that we have been having, the various representation of elections, which are actually not elections. And the African Union has actually taken the side of the election violators, the dictators themselves, and it stands with them by coming forth and saying the election was fair and fair, yet it has been marred by a number of challenges. Look at the conflict in the DRC. Which stand has the African Union come up with to put a stop to Rwanda's aggression on the DRC? Okay, so by President Ruto saying that the African Union should represent the needs and concerns of the people, he should basically know that there is absolutely no African Union existing. And besides, the African Union itself is being funded by those nations that actually call. I think one of the biggest funders of the African Union must be the EU and the United States. Where's the funding from the individual 53 African governments? It's nowhere to be seen. He is talking about facts, but the challenge is that they do not apply. Let the African Union stand with the African people first and help in conflict resolution. For example, helping to stop leaders who have imposed themselves on the people through rule of guns. Help organize free and fair election. Help in conflict management. The individual leaders are going to Russia and USA, buying weapon systems individually and coming and then disturbing their neighbors. Where is the African Union in all of that? So that is where I see that it will never work. It will never work. Take a second example. IGAD has tried to resolve the current crisis in Sudan, but the Sudanese government has said it will not take part in any meeting where Kenya is taking part, simply because President William Ruto, during his campaigns, he received funding from the Command of the Rapid Support Forces. So with all that intrigue, how does President Ruto himself expect to have a united front in the African Union if he himself broke the rules, received external funding when he was campaigning in Kenya from the Rapid Support Forces, and now he comes here, seated on a white horse, and is saying that we need to have a united front through the African Union? If you cannot be taken as a credible mediator within the Sudanese conflict, then how do you expect to, for instance, how do you expect the government of Sudan to represent Kenyan's needs in the Russian conference?
Okay, let us start with that. Doctor.
Well, the question, actually, he said so many things that's so valid. We've already talked about it already also, because the credibility of what President Ruto said, we said at the beginning, as I said, I don't believe most of what President Ruto says, because he speaks on both sides of the mouth, as the expression goes. Because my question at the beginning, who created the African Union, AU, or UA, whatever? Yeah, AU. What is that for? With all this conflict that exists in Africa, where is the African Union? Those are the type of question we raised at the beginning of this debate. Because as long as that group is, that organization does not stand for African problem, that means it was created by somebody else for different purpose, different interest. What is going on in the DRC, aggression of Rwanda, where is the UA or AU? Excuse me, I'm thinking in different languages at the same time. That's creates a big problem, because the African nation who's supposed to be there for all these problems in Africa, like a NATO. Look at how NATO is standing. You touch one, the rest is already there to protect. But UN, AU, excuse me, AU, it doesn't not do the same thing. And yet, Ruto comes and talks to us sweetly to distract our mind, to take our mind someplace else where the problem is elsewhere. And he is the one of the problems that we're having on that continent. He is one of the problems. And yet, he's the one who's going to come, as the gentleman said, comes with on a white horse, like a, I'm the savior. You're not the savior. So I think that's my biggest problem, the lack of credibility for what Ruto says. I think we qualify that as a simple Ubwenge. But he better keep that to himself, because he cannot continue to spread it while everywhere. We have already read that already.
Senior.
Yeah, my brother is correct. This man, the first thing President Ruto has displayed is lack of credibility.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't have it. as this guy called, the guy calling from Germany, he was asking whether there is AU. I think I have a quick answer. There is no such a thing as AU. The Organization of African Unity, which was formed by African leaders in I think it was 62 or 63. You can correct me on the date, but way back then. It was formed by African leaders. Although they had a problem, they wanted to have a united Africa, which Nyerere rejected, and Kwame Nkrumah was pushing a very strong united Africa, because he said, without African unity, we cannot protect our newly acquired independence. And time has proved him right. The OAU also had another mission, which was to liberate all the African continent, which was still under colonialism, namely Southern Africa, which was under the worst colonialism, which I have termed settler colonialism. And thank God to the leadership of President Nyerere was given the leadership of that commission. They worked a damn good job. Otherwise, it would have taken Southern African countries a longer time to achieve independence. But how did these guys do it? They did it because they looked for support and help anywhere else they could get it. And that support didn't come from the capitalist countries, which are now screwing us. They were on the side of the exploiters. Now, these guys, they used their leverage and they destroyed the OAU. And they created this thing called the AU. This thing was created, unfortunately, with people like Thabo Mbeki in the leadership to destroy the old AU, which made Mbeki become a recognizable name and the president of a newly acquired, a newly independent country. It's very unfortunate. Again, this is where we are getting these people who have been manipulated and they came into power and they are serving the interests of the people who have always been exploiting us. AU was formed. The formation, by the way, the formation of AU involved people from these countries like United States, the World Bank, IMF. We are present in the formation of AU. But none of these hyenas were present when OAU was being formed in Addis Ababa. You see the difference?
In fact, in 2021, even Israelis joined the AU.
All right. Now you've proved me right. When this thing was formed, it was what Kwame Nkrumah said, the stage of neo-colonialism. What AU is doing is to promote, defend, and amplify the agenda of the neo-colonialists. That's what it is doing. So this man is right to ask, is it still in existence? Hell no. We have the exploiters now working with black people who are masquerading as Africans when they are rotten inside them. These are the people we should get rid of by any means necessary, if I could really advocate for that. So we need to have a whole new thing, which is manned, designed by indigenous, authentic Africans who understand who we are, not these puppets.
Thank you very much.
If I can add just a word there.
For that. answer. Hope, Raymond, you are at peace. Okay, let us listen to this one.
Good evening. Prince, thanks for the show. And the whole staff of UNN. Our guest in the studio, Mr. Kintu, and the professor, thank you all for coming and teaching us a lesson on history. So me, personally, I think the main step as Africans have to take to start back in our countries, like in Uganda. For me, I believe the first procedure is to get rid of religion. Second, we have to teach our Africans our own religion way back. Second, education system. We don't have to teach our people the method of remembering the history of everything. We have to teach our children practical knowledge. Third, we have to get rid of the Western financial system. We have to develop our own system. Even if it's to be barter trade, we can know we have it. Where no one can dictate what we want, just because they are owning us or they are giving us loans. Then, third, we have to get rid of politics. We have to go back to federal system whereby it will bring our leaders and the natives and the people together. So to bridge that gap, I think through federal, that is the only way. Then also we can have our own, we have to invest in our own languages. We don't have to use English. We just have to invest in our own mother tongue. And as well as we have to develop our own communication systems so that we are self-reliant. We don't have to depend on Twitter, on Facebook. We have the ability to do those things. Then also we have to get out of the kind of food our people eat. Like we have to make sure all genetically modified food, we are out of it, including the medicine, the Western medicine. Because the Western medicine, most of those medicine are not meant for us. For us, we have our local herbs. We can develop those ones. So I think those are some of the steps. And I personally believe for all those to be implemented, I strongly believe it will start with Uganda. It will start, I believe, every liberation in Africa, it will start with our country, Uganda. Thank you. And also I've forgotten, for Africa to be liberated, we have to get rid of the Tutsi and the Wahima in East Africa. So mainly that is Uganda. For us to have peace, stability, and coexistence with other countries.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me read through this message also so that you can answer the both viewers. He said, it's great to see you again in studio, and we are glad to have the professor and our usual suspect, our intellectual, Mr. Remigius Kintu. Africans have a competitive advantage over the Europeans, over Americans, and Asians if we understand who we are and what we want to be in the future. We must get rid of the obstacles these puppets are representing the Western world. It is true we must go our way. We can achieve this by joining hands to go for what we all need as Black continent: our sovereignty. We all must fight to develop our Black continent. There is no place like home. All exploiters and colonialists must pull out from Africa. They must stop their involvement in Africa, our Black continent. Their support for dictators, then we can have negotiation Ruto is talking about. Thank you for being with us, Professor Kazadi, and your insight to African problems. We will be glad to see you again in the UNN studios. Senior Remigius Kintu, we appreciate all your effort and input to see us through. All right, we are going to stop there. Let us hear from the guests, and we conclude the show. Doctor.
Well, the last gentleman who called has so many pointers, very important, that should be addressed, but I can only address one or two of those because those are my field of interest and my field of expertise. I leave the rest on to my brother who's more widespread, who can focus on many other points. But the point I'm interested in, and I can address those related to education. I recall I was in Amsterdam giving a paper at ISMI. ISMI is an international society for music educators. And I was placed on a commission that was mandated to develop music for young children, African children in African schools. And we did, in our discussion, our commission, they wanted to develop a system of a music system for those kids out there. It was interesting that they wanted to start putting all this Mozart and all this. I had to raise my head. I said, no, Africa has so much music that we don't need to go to Europe to get the system to put in African schools. No, we take the music straight from Africa for the children to learn and develop our own system there. Very strange that I was kicked out of the commission because they didn't like my view that we had to go to Africa, take African songs and all that to develop from there. They wanted to get the African music from Europe. So that is, again, for education, I can say that we can develop our own teaching education system in Africa. Because prior to coming to Europeans coming to we had our own system. the way we teach. See, we belong to, we have what we know as an oral tradition. The oral tradition is a teaching system. Everything that we have it in songs. Everything, oral tradition, songs contains everything you want to know about us, from the day we started to the present, all in the songs. If you want to know about this ethnic group, look at their songs, and that's education. That's how we teach our children. Oral tradition, teach them through songs. Once they can sing it, they will remember it longer than if you give them a book and they have to memorize something. No, just tell them songs. Even us today, the grown-ups, we remember things through songs. So for education, I would say that if we can just focus on our own culture, we have our own way of doing things. And that way, for us, oral tradition will contain everything that we need. Everything. Be it history, teaching, singing, the way of governing ourselves, the governance, everything is in all oral tradition. Songs will contain everything that we need to know. That I can address. But the rest of food and all that, I like food too, but I can't, I don't know. Besides nyama choma and and the ugali and the sukuma wiki and all those things. So those are the good things. But I agree with the caller. We need to develop all our own way, even the food, banking, and all the system, everything. I agree with the caller. Those are very important things to do. Religion, of course, we know that the survival of our own religion outside of Africa, we see the trace of those in Americas, Brazil, Cuba, and all those people. They have our own religion, which has dominated there. In the 80s, there was a system known as the renewal system, which was to take the high priests celebrate from Americas, send them to Africa, and take those from Africa, send them to the Americas. The purpose was what? Was to see those in Africa came to the Americas to learn how it used to be. And those in America were sent to Africa to learn how it is. Because when those former Africans were taken to the Americas, they kept the practice, the rituals were kept. It's kind of an earlier form and a more intact structure. But those in Africa today, they are continuing to adapt and change again, the influence coming from all over the place. So the religion, we are adapting also very quickly in Africa. We see that, for example, in the Congo, what we call Église de Réveil. Église de Réveil, there's a kind of awakening churches that have been coming up. Why? In order to adapt to the reality of the people. In 1972, I think, there's a Congolese musician, may his soul rest in peace, who sang "Oh Nakumi Tunaka." I asked myself, why is it that in the church you go, you find all the saints are white but only the devil is black. So he's questioning himself. In fact, that's when also President Mobutu, there was a problem between the church and the state. It was the same 1972, and this musician brought that song out, Nakumitunaka. So religion, we are still today waking up and coming up with our own way of as praising the Lord. So I think we have to continue in those lines in order to bring Africa from under all this religious domination also. And I thank the gentleman very much for...
Okay, Senior Remigius, briefly to those callers.
Clearly, I have no other thing to add on. But one thing I want to mention with respect to Nakometu Naka song, which I enjoy very much. In the African mythology, we always depict the devil as a white thing with white ashes on the face. That is the African mythology. And since we have already praised ourselves for being the originators of civilization, I think the African mythology is more right than what you are singing, this man was singing about, that the devil is black, because the devil ain't black. The devil is white. That's what the African mythology, which has run into the test of time for millions of years. Now, back to the caller. I'm not going to argue very much about religion, because religion is something very sacred. Every civilization has religion, and you have to respect it. It is not a point of division. And I can say this from my own family background. I remember when my father, before he died, he called me up and said, "Son, we need a contribution from you." Because we were sitting in the clan meeting. Our clan is the Leopard clan among the Baganda. We had a clan meeting and we agreed to build a church for our clansman who died as a Uganda Martyrs. Those who know about religion in Uganda, we have the Uganda Martyrs. That young boy was called Mugaga. He's now, according to the religion, is a saint. So we need to build a shrine at where he was born in the village. Now, who was the chairman of our meeting? His name is Abdallah, a Muslim, but trying to build a church of a Catholic saint. And he said, I am not advocating this in support of Catholicism. I am advocating it because this boy belonged to our clan. So if one wants to bring religion as a dividing factor among people, I would say go back to the 1400 with Henry VIII, who wanted to bring religion as a dividing factor. We are all one people. Now, this scholar mentioned politics, that we should get rid of politics. Well, I got good news for you. What is politics? Politics is the interaction of two or more people, whether it is to do with a village life or sexual relationship or organization of a society or a nation. That's politics. So you cannot get rid of it. Please don't bite something you are not able to chew. Politics, as long as you are going to have two or more people interacting with each other in whatever form, there is going to be politics. So you can't get rid of it. The caller talks about investing in our languages. Absolutely, I agree with you. You cannot learn new languages if you have abandoned your own. And the substance of your identity is in your language, because your language gives you the foundation of everything upon which you can excel and propel. Those of us who know more than one language, we started with mastering our own language, our mother tongue. Then we can explore learning, be it French, English, Chinese, Russian, you name it. Even Swahili, which is not our own language. So please, I agree with you. We need to invest in teaching our own mother tongues first and learn other languages. By the way, I support knowing at least, you should know at least 2 or 3 languages in your life. Staying with only one language, you are doing yourself a disservice, because you cannot understand other people unless you can penetrate into their language. But you penetrate into them from your own. You don't jump on top of them without knowing your own. Self-reliance, absolutely. I agree with you. We have to be self-reliant. And by the way, we have everything. I remember I did a feasibility study in Uganda. We were going to build a brick factory, and I negotiated the machinery and the financing. And the factory was going to make 100,000 bricks a day. It was a high-powered factory. But when we did the study, we found that we can, with that quantity, we can only reach 14% of the demand for bricks in Uganda. Now, one would think that we are going to be a monopoly. No. It was going to supply 14% of the demand at that time. Now, there are so many things we can do if we are thinking in terms of self-reliance. We have a market, if we are talking about economic development, we have a market within our countries that you do not have to look at exporting to Poland. Let the Polish people come and beg you because they need your coffee, which they cannot grow in their own, frozen land. And then you can sell it to them at any price you want because you have monopoly over it. They will be on their knees begging you for cocoa, for coffee, for tea. And look at a country like Belgium. It's a very big major steel producer. They don't even have one hole in their ground to dig iron. We got plenty of the damn thing. I mean, the reason why they are really screwing us, to be honest with you guys, is because we are stupid. We don't realize what we have and what they do not have. How can you tell me Swiss chocolate? Since when did they grow cocoa in those Arab mountains? They are getting it from Ghana, from Ivory Coast, from Latin America, and they are sitting there and they're priding themselves as making Swiss chocolate or British tea when it's all coming from Kericho. It is we have to get rid of stupidity in the first place. If we are not that stupid, all these things wouldn't be in existence. And the problem with you Africans, you are listening to Africans who are contaminated with marijuana in their brains instead of listening to intelligent people like us who are telling you the truth. And you are spending your life away because you are contaminated with marijuana, drunkard bastards, instead of listening to brains. And we have plenty of them. UNN has brought so many of them. I'm so impressed. I've seen so many brains here on UNN, ranging from wonderful engineers to wonderful IT technicians, and we are still crying that our countries are behind. Hell no. This lady who called, well, she brought up another topic of the Tutsi problem. Definitely, the problem of Uganda, Congo, Rwanda is nothing but Tutsis. But that's a different subject. We are not going to deal with it right now. And everyone has a way of dealing with it. My point is we have to take charge of our countries. We have to take charge of ourselves. And as long as we are remaining stupid, we are going to be screwed. It's that simple.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. This one said, the World War II gave birth to pure, heartless Europeans, and so should all African become on trade and policy, natural resources. Okay, that one will be another day talk. Now, as we near the end of tonight's show, we have explored the speeches of President Yoweri Museveni, President William Ruto, and a passionate address by a Zimbabwean gentleman shedding light on the changing dynamics between Africa and the West. Through our insightful discussion with Dr. Kazadi wa Mukuna and, of course, Senior Remigius Kintu, we have gained valuable perspectives on the aspirations of African leaders, the quest for equal representation, and the need for a shift in narrative. This thought-provoking conversation emphasizes the importance of recognizing Africa's own capabilities, culture, and values as we navigate the complex landscape of international relations. Before we conclude, I would like to invite Dr. Kazadi wa Mukuna and Senior Remigius Kintu to share their closing thoughts on tonight's discussion and the way forward. Doctor.
Thank you very much indeed. I hope we did cover our topic well, which I think we did. But we only can say we're repeating ourselves practically by saying that we Africans must focus on ourselves first. Who are we? As Cheikh Anta Diop puts it, the origin of civilization started in Africa. But we got ourselves taken in different direction for some reasons. I don't know how, but I think he did point out in his book. So we just have to focus a little bit more on who we are, because by knowing who we are, we will know where we are, because we know where we come from and where we are to prepare for the future. We cannot continue to borrow blindly from Western culture. We cannot. China has done it, and they've defined themselves. So we should also do it in order to define ourselves as a continent, nations, and people. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to Dr. Senior Remigius.
Well, thank you very much for hosting us on this wonderful Saturday. And I want to thank my brother, Dr. Kazadi, for sharing his brilliant knowledge and wisdom, because those two go together on this very show. And I hope that all our listeners have learned something out of this show, and they can take it and use it. But most importantly, remember, we are Africans. We cannot be anything else. And we should be proud of the very fact that we are the original people and the source of civilization for the entire planet that we live on. After knowing that and appreciating it, then we are going to work for the survival of the African race. Thank you very much for joining us.
And that brings us to the end of tonight's special edition of Intelligent Insights on UNN TV, the Truth Command Center. We extend our deepest gratitude to Dr. Kazadi wa Mukana and Mr. Remigius Kintu for their valuable contributions to our exploration of African politics and Western relations. We hope that tonight's discussion has sparked new perspectives and fostered a greater understanding of the challenges and inspirations faced by African leaders. Join us next time for more thought-provoking conversations. Until then, stay informed and keep seeking the intelligent insights that shape our world. Thank you and good night. But don't forget, we had a musicologist in studios, so I can't go without leave you with some Lumba melodies music. Bye-bye for now and good night.